So also warm welcome from me today. Um, yes, this is a very special evening, I think, this closing event. And for me, having witnessed also all these conversations over the past 3 days was very special. I think this is a very special cohort and group of people that I had the privilege to meet. And I think also the broadness of activities and themes that have been discussed. We started with the water and the ocean and how the ocean divides us and connects us, and how it's the archives of these immensely complex histories that kind of brought us also here together. And moving from the water to the land, trying to understand how, we can create sustainable habitats for the humans, but also the non-human beings that we have. So I think now, having talked about this on a more, let's say, metaphorical level also in many ways, I think it's good to kind of also come down to a kind of reality check. Yeah. And now have this opportunity today here to have you here to speak about these frameworks that make these conversations possible, because, let's be real, we need that. We need that support. We need these institutions. We need these structures. And so I wanted to start with you, Katharina, because you were the one that was very involved in the setup of the residency program in Salvador, and maybe also with this idea, which is about 10 years ago, that kind of picked up a zeitgeist that it was all about understanding the South, or let's call it the so-called South. And maybe you could start there, also for the audience to understand where this is coming from, this whole trajectory that led us here today.
Well, you have time, I hope. Thank you so much. Yvette, it is a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. I was the director of the Goethe-Institut in Brazil, many years ago. And as you all know, the Goethe-Institut is a worldwide organization. The German Cultural Institute with 150 institutes, and quite a lot also in South America. And it was, I think, a very, very exciting moment to be there in that time, because the Goethe-Institut is not an institute that showcases German culture or whatsoever, or just teaching German language. What we go out for is to have a conversation and exchange with the countries we are guests in, and to see in which way we can look at the themes and the issues we have together, and building platforms, building spaces for this creative exchange also. So in this case, when I was in Brazil, we started a big project that was called Episodes of the South. South meaning, so to say, the global majority, not the global South as our motif or kind of logo was a map of the world, having the Antarctica in the center. And you can imagine, if you have seen this, if you see it, you don't really know, where's my continent, where am I from, and so on. So it was a very interesting exchange. We looked at how the museums, for instance, work in different areas in the world. We looked at how art history maybe had to be rethought. We looked at the indigenous artworks that influenced so many artists in the West without being acknowledged, and so on. So we had a specific 3-year project, and one of my absolute favorite baby was the creation of a residency in Salvador at our Goethe-Institut in the then called Villa Azul. It was the first residency of the Goethe-Institut that had a thematic focus, not just not only for artists, for musicians, for literature, for authors, and so on, but literally the South was supposed to be the general theme, and we also didn't only wanted to invite German artists, but also people from various other regions, as we still have this concept, which is beautiful to have this collaboration with the KfW Foundation, having people from the so-called global South. And it was a very lucky moment because the villa was quite, run down, and it needed renovation. And then we persuaded, actually it's owned by the German government. We persuaded, so to say, the Foreign Office to say, let's do a residency there, because we think this is the most sustainable possibility to have these spaces for exchange, for learning together, for exchanging, for creating together, and experience together. And as we already heard, it was obviously very, very fruitful exchanges over the last 3 years, but also before. We had also quite great artists there, like Isaac Julian or Grada Quilombo and so on, Quilomba. So that was a really great pleasure for me to see this thrive. And then the big project we started in Salvador was the Echoes of the South Atlantic. It was a project that looked at the relations between Africa, South America, and Europe, of course, in its past, present, and future. And the first conference on that was dealing with the past. It was the idea of looking at the possibilities to see in which way we could deal with our history together to go into a better future. And it was very sad because the third year was supposed to be in Dakar. The first one was in Salvador, and then we had the second year in the conference in Berlin, and the third one was supposed to be in Dakar, and unfortunately COVID-19 came, and we had to put this online. But I think the whole notion, the idea of trying to have this ocean, and you were talking about the water, this South Atlantic not as a splitting, but as a unifying space. That was the idea, and the residencies obviously followed up on these. So in the end, I think it's a way of dealing with bringing people together, trying to address issues creatively, aesthetically, artistically, where I think these ways of rethinking what we think is already there and is already set. I think this is something we should follow up on, especially in times like this, where the borders get higher and higher, and then the idea of the nation is reconquering our politics and so on, and instead of thinking of putting us together or bringing us together again. So I think this residency is something the Goethe-Institut is very happy to have, and thank you so much for having this collaboration. And I think we should think of continuing this very good project. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Katharina. I think that was really important to understand that context also, because now we are in 26 and maybe it's much more common that these topics are being picked up, but it's also not that long ago that we actually had to start this, you know.
Yeah.
So it's around 10 years ago that it became much more present, around the time that you started this as well. And now I wanted to ask you, Friederike, maybe to speak a bit more specifically also about the Villa Sul, in the sense, I mean, you described a little bit the history in the beginning, but also when we think around this notion of the South and residency programs, the Villa Sul is in the end a guest, or maybe or not. You can explain that in more detail. In Salvador, and Salvador is a very specific place to choose also for this kind of program. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about how you dealing with that positioning in terms of the relationships with Salvador, with the people there, with the city, and then also having coming in all these people from all over the world, and how you try to bring that together.
Yeah, well, as I tried to explain already in my greetings, Salvador is a very diverse city. You have the indigenous people, you have the majority of Afro descendants, you have people originally coming from Portugal or other European countries. So it's really very diverse, and therefore I think it's a fantastic place for a residency, because everybody knows about the carnival, and everybody knows this lovely, delicious food coming from the northeast and all this. But it also has this very painful side, and a lot of difficulties are still there, and a lot of questions have not been fully answered. So therefore, I think it's a fantastic place for a residency. And I mean, when we talk about residencies, everyone has a different idea maybe about what is a residency. And our residency house is very specific in bringing people together. It's not so much about, at the end of a residency, to have an object or something you can exhibit. It's really about the international artists coming to Salvador and getting in touch with local artists, with local experts, and listen, and also informing about where they come from. Because we all know that there are a lot of maybe cliches or prejudices, and therefore we said this is the focus of the residency program, that you really have this 2 months of staying in Salvador to get in touch, to cooperate, and later on we will hear about one of these wonderful cooperations that took place. And we give this house as a platform. I mean, we always say Goethe-Institutes are usually it's a very important part of our work to provide platforms for exchange. Talking about guests, the question is, after 64 years being in Salvador-Bahia, are we still guests, or are we already part of the cultural life? And I would say it's a little bit more the second, because there, a lot of people don't see us as Goethe-Institut. They see us as a German-Brazilian cultural institution. So during the military dictatorship, this house was a safe haven for people, for students, for artists who were against the military regime. In this building, the Afro-descendant activists met to sign a charter about 30 years ago. I have to look at my colleague Lionel. It's about 30 years ago. So this building is also regarded from local artists, from academics, as part of their own culture and cultural life. Sorry. So therefore, we are something in between, and which is also fantastic, not just to be seen as a alien institution. Everybody knows that we are having German programs. We have German exams, everything, but they also see us as part of their own.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, I think it's important that these kind of relationships can be kept up, and that this is like the key of the work that you're trying to do. So I would like to also come to you, Daniela. Maybe you could just talk a little bit more about this idea of the KfW Foundation to provide structures for collaboration, for exchange, particularly with the, context of the so-called Global South. And, I mean, there are reasons for this, and maybe you could go a little bit into that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. And thank you, everyone. The idea of us sitting here before we move on to the next panel is also to, talk about that wider scope and how what needs to happen on an institutional side to create these platforms for then artists, practitioners to take these platforms and turn them into something that they can use and grow, basically. I took so many notes as you two were speaking, and I feel a bit like you that I could talk forever. So, Yvette, please stop me. But a few thoughts. This idea of a changing zeitgeist, and you were talking about Villa Sul being founded 10 years ago. 10 years ago. So KfW Stiftung, the foundation, is relatively young if you think of KfW Bank to be a post-war institution. And we are also around for, I think, 12 years now, 13 years now. So similar time, actually. And at the same time, when it was agreed that there would be different fields in which the foundation would be active, one of them is arts and culture, another is ecology and sustainability, for example, the focus was set on the so-called intercultural dialogue. Now, what means an intercultural dialogue? 10 years ago, that was something different than it was then 5 years ago. And the discussion around it was again different than it is being discussed today. So we are an operational foundation, which means the programs we fund, we can develop ourselves. We always do that with partners, and Goethe-Institut has been a very valuable partner for these past 10 years in different programs. And I would say that a big part of my operational job in shaping the arts and culture funding program, as I have been in the past years and before my colleague has, is finding out what intercultural dialogue means. And in that, we had a bit of a development. Residency programs have been a super important tool for us from the beginning, because as you already stressed, it's a platform to bring people together, to enable conversations, to enable production in the broadest sense, process-driven production with open outcome or no outcome. And we had a program in Berlin that ran for 10 years in cooperation with the Künstlerhaus Bethanien. You see some photos going through on the screens, where we invited artists to Berlin for a year and to work there. And we kept learning from these programs, like the Berlin one. And the artists gave us feedback and told us, this is all great. And the program was a very valuable one for everyone involved. And however, we would like to be talking to our peers in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and in our neighboring countries. And the realization that for many artists on the African continent, it's easier to exhibit in Paris, London, or Berlin rather than in a neighboring country on the continent was one thought. Another was that, as Michael Helbig was saying, there is a certain urgency that was getting bigger and bigger in the past 10 years on climate change, etc. And also the understanding that we are a very broad thematic foundation. And so two things happened. We started to think more in themes and thematic impulses, and we started to think more in transcontinental relationships for our residential programs. So not constantly inviting everyone to Berlin, but broaden that conversation between people. And that's how we landed from a residency program in Berlin at a residency program with the Villa Sul. So when we started our conversation, and with your colleagues actually as well, it was at the time when we had all these conceptual thoughts on our strategy for the residency program, thinking we want to set certain themes, we want to connect certain communities, we're looking how to implement networks globally but still considering local structures. And all that sounds very abstract, I know, but it's not really when you think of the Villa Sul. So we bring in international artists like the wonderful group that's been here for this week. They come with their individual practices, with their research, with their ideas and perspectives, and they use the platform that the Villa Sul has been offering. And from my point of view, there was really something happening with the Goethe-Institut offering a platform into the city of Salvador and the region of Bahia. And we've been talking about it this morning and at other times. And I'm looking at Leonel Henkes because I know he has a big part in this, in drafting connections between people. And then the artists make something from it themselves. You know, all we can do from an institutional side is create that structure. And then it's been astonishing, and this week particularly, to see what you made of it. So the residency program is always shaped by those who participate. The institutions can only lay the groundwork. But yeah, intercultural dialogue shaped that thought, and we continue to, and we always will. So with each program and with this symposium this week, we take new impulses, like Michael also said, thoughts and ideas that we will feed into the next programming and react, and we can constantly move further towards that. Yeah. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. It does. So thank you so much to all three of you. I think it was really important also for the audience to just get a sense, at least, of what the thinking is behind these programs and how these collaborations come about. So.
But Yvette, may I, you are not our moderator by chance. We asked you to do this because you are an expert in your own field and you have this platform, Contemporary End, and we were wondering, maybe in the context that we're in, can you briefly share a little bit your perspective on all this? Share briefly what Contemporary End is and how you see that in relation to what we are doing. And then we will leave you alone and ask the artists to come on stage.
Okay. So we founded Contemporary End in 2013. So a bit earlier to these programs, but in a time where there was a lot of thinking around creating connections between, in our case, specifically Africa and the global diaspora. And the idea from the beginning was to kind of create a platform where all these complex voices and perspectives can find a space. Mm-hmm. So it comes really from a moment where there was still a lot of talk of, for example, African art. Mm-hmm. This idea of this kind of homogeneous thing, which is obviously it's not. And so the idea really was to kind of unravel these complexities and doing that by building networks. So I think the strongest connection here is really that with the end from the very beginning, it was clear it's not about, setting up a platform or a magazine in the beginning that kind of has an editorial staff and then people kind of travel to the Dakar Biennial for 3 days and come back and write their review and then they go to Sao Paulo, but to always have people on the ground that like literally are on the ground, also not expat people, but like people that are part of the scene that really know and understand and want to share what their perspectives are. And this is like the key to our work till the present day. And over the past 13 years, of course, these networks have grown enormously, but it always comes down to that. So I would always also say, yes, the End has a certain structure built by now because we have 2 magazines, one magazine also that came about in conversation with Katharina at the time when we started the End America Latina. So we have, of course, these core structures that we built, but also here, of course, it's structures that we decided what kind of structures these can be. So we are a very kind of international team. But then in the end is the network. So it's defined by that because all the content that you find on the platform digitally or be it in print or through workshops or other education programs that we're running, it always comes down to the network. So it's always about bringing people together, having that exchange, and then also find sustainable ways to keep kind of, these connections in that exchange. And I think, we're lucky enough to have that platform where we can do that and where we can pick up on that and where we can share that. And so that's basically the connection between the local and the global, maybe also, where you have a digital format that, of course, can be accessed from everywhere, but at the same time, it reflects certain localities that then suddenly become global because they can be accessed from various places in the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do a lot of stuff, but I'm not going to go into this, but I think this is like maybe the core idea of what we do. Maybe just one more aspect is that we haven't spoken so much about this here in this context, but of course the language aspect. So the end has from the beginning been in French, in English, and then in America Latina, in Brazilian Portuguese. And so of course these are the big colonial languages, but it was also always clear that when we build a platform like that, it can't be only in that main language that we are also communicating it right now, like in English, so at least to broaden that up, and we are also in the process to now integrate more and more indigenous languages, which of course comes also with its own challenges, but it's more about also of making a point of that, we are aware how we actually communicate when we're building these networks, because it comes with these complexities, of course, because just being part of a global diaspora doesn't mean that we're all thinking the same, obviously. So that's the whole point. And so, I think it's just, as I said in the beginning, beautiful to see then if there are moments like this where people then also come together, of course, and it's not just in this kind of more digital sphere where the exchange happens, to have these moments as well.
Thank you. I think we will